I open this Ottawa City Commission meeting, the regular meeting of the City Commission. It is July 1. It is 7 p.m. in the evening, and we have a disclosure. So as many of us are meeting by distance through Zoom, so would the city clerk read the disclosure necessary for that kind of a meeting?
Yes, this is Amy Finch, City Clerk speaking, and I'll be providing information for remote access to tonight's meeting as well as procedural guidelines that will be followed. Due to efforts to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, physical access to the City Commission meeting will be restricted. In accordance with the Kansas Open Meetings Act, COMA, the meeting can be viewed live on Channel 23 and via Facebook Live or listened to by dialing 312-626-6799 and entering meeting ID code 999-3758-0860#. That information is also available at the top of today's agenda. Guidelines for this meeting are as follows. Each member of the public, staff, or presenter is required to state the individual's name and title, if any, each time the person speaks or votes so that the individual can be identified by remote listeners or observers. Citizens that submitted comments by 4 p.m. today to publiccomments@ottawaks.gov were given to the City Commission to be read during public comment or during discussion on an agenda item. The Commission must describe at the beginning of the meeting the process that will be used for a closed or executive meeting pursuant to KSA 75-4319 and amendments thereto.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I call this meeting to order. Mayor Tom Wygand, and I ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Wygand.
Present.
Commissioner Kaler. Present. Commissioner Crowley.
Present.
Commissioner Skidmore.
Present.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
Present.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, City Manager Einstad.
Richard Nienstead, City Manager. I just want to let you know that besides the staff that are on Zoom, City Attorney Blaine Finch is also with us this evening in case you have questions on any of the items.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I want to welcome all of those who are with us tonight, whether they're in this room, which very few are, as well as on social media, listening to us on social media and other means of communication by phone. With that, we'll stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll remain standing. Wendy, would you lead us in the invocation? Do the invocation for us, please.
Yes, if you'll bow with me. Thank you, Father, for this day, for the people that are here, asking your blessing on this meeting and on the decisions that need to be made tonight. We ask for your comfort for those who are suffering from or who have passed away in family or suffering from issues related to COVID-19. We thank you for the many blessings, the opportunity to be in our homes, be at work, be with our family and friends, and we ask again your blessing on those whose lives are not as fortunate as ours. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Wendy. We have a consent agenda, items 6 and 7, which are the minutes from the May 11, 2020 meeting and the May 18, 2020 study sessions. I would ask for any comments on those, corrections on those, or approval of the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Ms. Kaler.
This is Sarah Kaler speaking, and I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Crowley will second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The regular agenda, do we have any public comments tonight?
Mr. Mayor, Amy Finch, City Clerk speaking. No one registered for public comment this evening.
Thank you very much. We'll dispense with the reading of those rules. At this time, I ask the I'd like to give the commissioners a chance to declare any conflict or communication they've had that might influence their ability to consider today's issues impartially. Anyone have any issues that they want to declare? Okay, well, good with that. New business. Amy?
City Clerk Amy Finch speaking. Agenda item 10, request for approval to waive requirements of lease agreement with Dodson Aviation.
And staff recommends waiving a requirement of the current lease to allow J.R. Dodson of Dodson International to assume the remaining time on the lease. Michael Hafley would speak briefly to that. We talked about that at the study session, and we understand what they're asking, I guess. Have you got any further to add?
This is Mike Hafley, Public Works Director. I do not have anything to add on top of what was said at the study session Monday night, but I believe J.R. Dodson is on the call.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
If the commission has any questions, or J.R., if you want to say anything, I'll turn it over to you or the commission.
Only if anybody has any questions.
My understanding is, J.R., you'll be assuming all the duties and obligations of the current lease with your father, which your father has, and he is being released totally?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes. Blake?
this is Commissioner Jorgensen. I do have a question for JR, or I'd like to give JR an opportunity to kind of let us know what his future plans are for the facility at the airport.
Well, to assume the current lease, and then in the future, I'd like to explore expanding our operations out there to be able to add more people and to do an extension to the lease. Right now, I believe the current lease has about an additional 7 years, and in correlation with expanding our footprint out there and our financial expenditures and more local people employed, would like to extend the lease beyond the 7 years. But that's not what I'm asking for here tonight.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you.
Commissioner, if it's good, Mark got a question of JR. Also, how soon do you anticipate renegotiating the lease? Are you thinking later this year or sometime next year?
Later this year is fine. To open negotiations, I have no issues with starting now, but there's also not the pressing deadline as there is with the estate planning for my father, who's 81 years old now. So.
Understand. All right. Thank you.
J.R.
Mayor Wygan,
Yes, Commissioner.
this is Sarah Kaler speaking. And I wonder if, we're kind of talking about a couple different things here. But I wonder if our city attorney may not want to clarify exactly what it is we're doing tonight, because I don't know that we're talking about a new lease. I think we're talking about some other stuff.
Michael?
I'd be happy to clarify, or if Mr. Finch wants to clarify, that's fine. I'll be quiet here and decide what you guys want to hear.
Mayor Wygand here, it is my understanding that you're assuming the lease, and you're asking us to let you be a yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Kaler.
I really, before we make any assumptions, I really just want to hear legally, what are we doing?
Yes, the leases with Dodson Aviation. I'm sorry, would you like me to explain?
Yeah, you can explain. I think our city attorney can explain it, just for our point of view on what it is we're doing as commissioners.
Yeah, Mayor Wygan, Glenn Finch, city attorney. The action tonight will be to authorize me to draft and the city manager to sign an addendum to the existing lease that would allow for the, in this case, the assignment of the Dodson portion of the lease to Dobson International Parks, the company owned by JR, who's with us this evening on the phone. And so the motion tonight should be to authorize me to draft and the city manager to execute that assignment. But we will be keeping the original lease terms until such time as those are renegotiated. So just want to be clear that tonight's action, you're giving your consent to allow that to happen. And the way you do that is through a motion of that type. So when you're ready, if you're ready, that will be the type of motion we're looking for. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other clarifications, Commissioner Kaler?
No,
Commissioners?
Sarah Kaler speaking. I think that we have lots of questions, and I think there's lots of promise moving forward with JR taking over. I think this is just one of many steps we will take to make sure that we continue to have some kind of relationship with this company.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I think Blaine did a great job explaining what we're actually talking about here on item 10. And with that being said, I'd make the motion to approve the request for approval to waive requirements of lease agreement with Dodson Aviation.
And Sarah Kaler will make a second.
Any other discussion? I just have a question that I asked. The improvements that you make or your father has made out there, are they on the tax rolls?
That's correct.
Okay. We're just moving the ownership of that lease tonight. So there's been a motion and a second. Would the city clerk call the roll? Call for the vote.
Speaking. How do you vote, Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Mayor Whitehead?
And I vote yes too. Motion carries. Thank you, JR. Good luck.
Okay, thank you very much. Look forward to working with you for many years, hopefully.
Hope so. Okay, we move to item 11.
The City Clerk, Amy Finch speaking. Agenda item 11, request for approval of ordinance for rezone request on property located at 2760 Kingman Road.
To rezone property from A Agriculture District to I2 planned, what is it, PPD, which is heavy industrial with proximity park development overlay district. We're asking for a rezone on that. Wendy, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yep, I'd be happy to. This is Wendy Lee, the Director of Community Development. This is an action that we had actually taken earlier this year, but due to some issues with both filing and adoption of the annexation related to the same property, we needed to start over and do it again. So we held a public hearing again on this item. There were no comments at this public hearing, but what we did in order to be true to the first public hearing was read in all the comments that were made the first time around. Staff had a conversation with Mr. Fogel, who had come in the first go in February and opposed this rezone. And he expressed some concern about being present or being able to use the technology. So we communicated with him that we would communicate both to the Planning Commission and to all of you his concerns, his continued objection to this rezone. And that was expressed through all the comments that were read into the file. At the conclusion of the public hearing, the Planning Commission recommended this item to you for adoption, just as they did in February. And Mr. Fogel then subsequently submitted a protest petition, which was deemed insufficient. So we would ask that you rezone this property to I2 with the proximity park development overlay, which then requires the property that is south of Kingman to have some of the same to have the same standards for development as property on the north side of Kingman.
Okay, very good. Any questions, commissioners? Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, this is Commissioner Jorgensen. The balance of the property that's owned by the Moore family, that will be behind this tract to the south, what's the present zoning of that ground? Or was it being changed from to the industrial?
It's being changed from agricultural. That was the zoning that was on it as it came forward from the county. It either comes in as agricultural or I think low-density residential. And then we have to take an action to rezone it. We haven't, as of yet, taken any action to rezone any of the remaining. So as we get a little further here, we're going to have this on our agenda for the zoning map, and we show it's agricultural.
And they will retain ingress and egress or access to that property from Kingman through other property that they own. Is that correct?
The proposed buyers of the parcel that's being proposed to be rezoned have not yet submitted a site plan for us to consider. But if there are multiple access points in proximity to each other, then they may need to develop an access point that would be dedicated as a city street. And so that has yet to be determined.
Okay.
This is Mayor Wygant. I've got a question, Wendy. What's the net effect to the owners of that property now? I guess if we did nothing tonight, it would remain zoned to heavy industrial.
No, actually, if you did not pass this action, it would remain agricultural, and that would, then what would happen is the contract that is pending on the sale of this ground would be void, because it's pending on the condition that it be rezoned. And that doesn't mean you have to do it. It just means that the people who are interested in purchasing the ground wouldn't have the ability to develop
Okay.
what they've anticipated.
We're going from agriculture to heavy zone.
Want to pursue
Okay.
closing on the property.
All right, that was an out of order question there. Any other discussion? I'd like a motion.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Skidmore, I'll make a motion to approve item 11 on our agenda.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioner Jorgensen seconds.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other comments or discussion? Being none, would the clerk call for the vote?
City Clerk Amy Finch speaking. How do you vote, Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Mayor Whitehand?
Yes, and I vote yes. 2, motion carries. Item 12.
City Clerk Amy Finch speaking. Agenda item 12, request for approval of ordinance de-annexing a portion of properties on Rock Creek Road.
De-annexation to correct the previous ordinance filed to annex properties at 2530 Rock Creek Road, 2564 Rock Creek Road, and 2590 Rock Creek Road. The Planning Commission has reviewed and recommends approval of the de-annexation by a vote of 5-0. Wendy?
Mr. Mayor, this is Wendy Lee, Director of Community Development. This item is before you because the original annexation that was done included tracts of ground that weren't intended to be annexed. They are on the other side of 59. All three of those addresses are really, on a map, would look like one kind of area parcel. And they were included with the legal description in error. It was on the title as well, but it was in error. And so to rectify that by statute, we called the public hearing by the petition, because we received a petition from the owners because they agreed. They did not mean for that to be included despite the previous petition, which did have it included. And there were no comments from the public. The Planning Commission recognized that we really, under the authority we were acting on for adopting by contiguous property, these are not contiguous to the current city limits, and thus that action just needed to be voided. And the cleanest way to do that is to de-annex. At the conclusion of the hearing, the Planning Commission recommends to the City Commission to de-annex said properties.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on this, Commissioners? Okay, I would call for a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Commissioner Kaler.
Commissioner Mr. Kaler speaking. I would move that we de-annex a portion of the properties on Rock Creek Road as listed and number 12 in our agenda.
Commissioner Crowley will second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Would the clerk call for the vote?
City Clerk Amy Finch speaking. How do you vote, Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yes.
Mayor Whitehand?
And I vote yes too. Motion carried. Item 13.
City Clerk Amy Finch speaking. Agenda item 13, request for approval of ordinance amending zoning district map.
Staff will outline recommended changes to zoning district map. Planning Commission recommends approval by a vote of 4 to 1. Wendy, you're up.
Mr. Mayor, this is Wendy Lee, Director of Community Development. Earlier this year, we began to realize that in the last adoption to the zoning ordinance, there were some errors on those GIS tracks, and we began to review the map top to bottom to discover all those. One of the reasons the error came to our attention, and we've had one other one, but was because somebody called to say, hey, I'm thinking about selling my property, what's my zoning? And we discovered that a property was zoned in a way that wasn't consistent with what we understood the property would have been and what it had historically been. That can happen, but usually if it's happened, there's a follow-up action at some point that says, oh yeah, it used to be zoned that, and we intentionally changed it to this, and there's notes and records about that. Unfortunately, just in the transition from using maps and kind of doing whole swatches and colorings to identifying parcel by parcel zoning, there were some errors in that map. So we reviewed the map. We also added to it, in addition to correcting the errors that we found, there were areas that had been rezoned since the last time the map was adopted, so we cleaned those up at the same time. We called a hearing for that. We notified the property owners who were affected. We're not bound to do that, but we wanted to be sure they knew we were working on correcting it. And then we provided a list of all of those parcels that were changing from the previously adopted map. The Planning Commission held a hearing on this. There were no public, well, I take it back. The one public comment they got was from a property owner who was being affected by the fact that there was an error on their property at 935 North Main. And they had a pending sale. And if the property wasn't rezoned, if it remained commercial, which was what was supposed to be on the north side of the road, but not on the south side of the road, they wouldn't be able to close. And so they testified that for them, this was an urgent issue, and they urged the Planning Commission to go ahead and pass it. We had considered holding it over for more than 1 month to give people plenty of time to participate, but they asked for the item to be moved on. So at the conclusion of the hearing, the Planning Commission felt that staff had reviewed the map several times and made corrections, and that they were comfortable with recommending to you adoption of this map.
Okay, thank you.
Wendy, Commissioner Crowley here. To me, this just seems like a kind of like a housekeeping thing, just to kind of clean up some stuff that's been kind of just hanging in the balance for a while. My question, I guess, is the Planning Commission recommended approval by a vote of 4 to 1. Can you tell me kind of what maybe the concerns of the one was?
Yes, that member actually wanted to delay the vote because that person had not been able to come to City Hall and look at the paper map up close and personal. They had it sent to them electronically, and we had, in addition to that, listed the properties. They would have felt more comfortable if they had been able to come see it. It was made available. They just weren't able to get it done. The other planning commissioners disagreed and felt that it was sufficient and proper and that they wanted to move forward. We had anticipated that member then was going to come in that same week so that we could reveal to you that while that was the vote, that person had withdrawn their concerns. but unfortunately, she didn't make her appointment that week. And so I can't assure you, although I think she'll ultimately be comfortable, she just couldn't vote that night. And that's the way it goes when you're the person voting. If you're not comfortable, then you're not.
Sure. No, and I appreciate the explanation. I was just trying to find, maybe what reasoning there would be, and I understand that reasoning. Thank you.
Any other questions? I'd like a motion.
Commissioner Skidmore, Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve item number 13 on our agenda.
A second?
Commissioner Crowley, I'll second.
Moved and seconded. No further discussion. I would call for the vote.
City Clerk Amy Finch speaking. How do you vote, Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Mayor Wygant?
And I vote yes also. Motion carries. Item 14.
City Clerk Amy Finch speaking. Agenda item 14, request for approval of ordinance granting conditional use permit for 834 South Pecan Street.
This conditional use permit would allow construction of a duplex at 834 South Pecan Street in a R1 low-density residential district. The Planning Commission recommends approval by a vote of 5-0. Wendy, you're up again.
This is Wendy Lee, Director of Community Development. Per the process that's identified in the zoning ordinance, the property owner made the request to ask for the conditional use. Before a conditional use permit can even be considered for a duplex in an R1 low density district, the staff actually has to do a math calculation to ensure that that area as a whole, that neighborhood, is not having significant change and that it still meets our mathematical calculations as for a low density district. In this circumstance, it did meet that conditions, and so they were able to submit their request, and they did so. There were no public comments at the meeting. We had been made aware that there was a citizen, a neighbor that had some concerns. The neighbor wasn't able to join us in the call, came in the next day, still had some concerns, picked up the paperwork for a protest petition so that they could understand that process, but they never did submit a protest petition, and really weren't clear what the concern was. They just wanted to understand it, I think. So the Planning Commission's recommendation by a vote of 5-0 is to approve this conditional use. You probably recall that we've done this a number of times around the community to provide affordable and new housing in all neighborhoods.
Okay, very good. We've seen that project. Commissioners, any discussion? Questions? Okay. Commissioner Kaler, yes.
Yes, and actually mine isn't a question, it's more of a comment. I appreciate the fact that Mrs. Lee gave us some detail about the citizen that came in, about they'd gotten a letter, they weren't really sure what was going on. And I think that is the case in so many times when these happen, and when these kind of things happen. You get a letter, you're not really quite sure what it is, and we at the city want to make sure that you know that you have the right and that you should ask questions. If you get a letter and things are changing and you're not sure what's going on, we want you to ask questions. So I'm so glad that that citizen came in, asked his or her questions, and got them answered. That's exactly how it should work in the world of cities. So in the world of municipalities. So I am happy to hear that the letter was heard and there were still questions and they came in for further clarification.
Great comments, Commissioner. It's been moved and seconded. If there's no more, no further I'm sorry?
Amy Finch, City Clerk speaking. I did not have a motion and a second recorded yet on this item.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, I'll make the motion then.
I thought we had that.
Commissioner Crowley.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Kaler will second.
Okay. All right, we've had our discussion, right? We will call for the vote.
City Clerk Amy Finch speaking. How do you vote, Commissioner Skidmore?
Yes.
Commissioner Jorgensen?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaler?
Yes.
Commissioner Crowley?
Yes.
Mayor Whitehan?
And I vote yes also. Motion carries. We're up to the city manager report, but we also have some department heads maybe that, Michelle, has the city got any job openings that you want to talk about? I know they're on our website. Michelle, can you hear us?
Yes, I was trying to switch, unmute. The only openings we have we have 2 firefighter positions, and we just completed interviews on Monday. Friday. And so we're working through that process and extending conditional offers to those candidates.
Okay. We got anybody else on that we need to? City manager report, Richard.
Richard Nienstead, city manager. I have a couple things I want to discuss, but before I do that, I'm going to let Mike Hafley talk to you about a couple issues that I'm going to discuss, what I need to discuss with you, and then we will wind up with the chief of police
Okay.
visiting with you a few minutes. So, Michael?
Mike Haefley, Public Works Director. One of the things I want to update the commission on, we've had some concerns about the restrooms, the public restrooms still being closed. Those restrooms are in Forest Park and Legacy Square. In talking with the county health department, they recommend to continue to leave those restrooms closed for at least the next month, while we're still in phase 3. The cleaning requirements and the possibility for spread is just too great. So I just want to update the commission that we have been in consultation with the county health department, and we're following their recommendations so far. The second thing I need to bring up is, if you remember several months ago, out at the airport, we received a grant from the FAA to install taxiway lights. Those lights were installed, and as they were in the process of being installed, we talked to the FAA about our next project, which was the wind cone project, and the FAA advised us to do a change order on that project on the taxiway lighting project to go ahead and get the wind cone done. Now the FAA has come back and told us they want to do a complete separate grant packet for that. Received the paperwork for that, the documents for that grant. One of the conditions of the signatures on that grant is to have the city commission approve my signature and Blaine's signature on that grant package. So I'm asking tonight for a consensus to allow both Blaine and I to sign that grant package.
Okay. How much money is involved here?
For the city, our share is roughly $5,000, Mayor.
Mayor Whitehan?
Yes, Commissioner Kaler.
Yes, Commissioner Kaler speaking. Mr. Hafley, are you looking for consensus, or are you looking for a motion and an actual vote for the signature?
Public Works Director Mike Haefley. I'm going to defer that to City Attorney Blaine Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Blaine Finch, City Attorney. We need something from you tonight that we can show in the minutes. If you want to do it by motion, second, and vote, that's fine. If you want to record a consensus, if it's unanimous, and have the city clerk record that in the minutes, that's fine as well. We just need something so that we can show that your approval has occurred in the minutes when Director Haefley and I sign off on that FAA application.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Commissioner Kaler.
I move that we give authority to Mr. Hafley and to Mr. Finch to sign the airport grant proposal as described at this meeting.
Okay, motion, is there a second?
Commissioner Skidmore will second that.
Been moved and seconded. I'm going to call for, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mike. Richard?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioners. Richard Ninestead, City Manager again. I just want to kind of prep you for Monday. You'll be getting your first look at the budget, and as we all agreed, what we've done is started 2020. We flipped 2020 over into 2021, and what we've really talked about, focused on, are what increases there might be in those budgets. So that's how you're going to see the memos. You'll also see a budget sheet like what you've seen in the past, but the memos will give you what something might have increased. There are some budgets that are remaining flat. There are some that have increased because of the cost of goods and services or government regulations that we have to do that. So you're going to see a big list. I think it ought to go fairly smooth for you as we work down that. The only exception to that are going to be the community service budgets. You're going to be getting a first look at them, but none of those to date have any increases in them for 2021 to you. And I would also say, as we're having the discussion, I know that this was a hot point with members of the legislature. I'm not sure I'd talk a whole lot about mill levies. I think in the interest of transparency, we ought to talk when we get to that point about the property tax levy itself. And it is what it is. It's nice that the mill levy kind of shows that, but most people are really in tune with what the property tax levy is. And my recommendation to you is that when we get to that point in about 3 weeks, that's what we ought to focus our attention on. So that's my advice to you. Okay. So, excuse me. Any questions on that?
You're saying you're starting with the base budget of the 2020 budget.
Yes.
For the 2021.
Yeah, what we actually did was take the 2020 budget that you adopted, that the commission adopted last August, and that is basically the 2021 budget.
Okay.
I would say that probably 90% of those budget numbers stayed true to 2020.
So, yeah, okay.
And I also told department heads that they could put on the end of their memo, if it was a perfect world and if in 2021 we could do these things, what is it we're leaving on the table? Because I think you ought to see that. I think you always ought to see that. So, okay?
Okay.
All right. So Monday's your study session. I'm assuming you want to keep it blended like this, and we will be in this room because we cannot get social distancing in that room there. And I just wouldn't recommend you put yourself in that position.
Okay.
All right? So I'd like to wind it up with Chief Weingartner.
Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, and Richard. I just want to take a couple minutes to have a discussion about the Governor Kelly's order requiring masks in public spaces that is supposed to be issued tomorrow. As you may have received an email or phone calls or conversations, and certainly the police department has received some citizen inquiries finding out what's going to happen. And until the order's issued, we really don't know and can't say for sure. So the first thing we're going to do is wait. And we're going to wait and receive that documentation, and then we'll see what aspect of it falls within the authority of police departments or law enforcement agencies related to that order. One of the first things I did this morning is I was listening to the county commission meeting, like I know several other city staff members were, and sent an email to the sheriff, the chief in Wellsville, emergency management, Chief Matthias, and our dispatch center to get a meeting scheduled together for tomorrow morning so that we can discuss kind of what's going to happen if and when some changes are required for us. Leading into the 4th of July holiday, knowing that most city, state, and federal offices are closed this Thursday or this Friday, getting an order out on a Thursday leaves little time for us to really prepare sufficiently to be able to respond. So the timeline for us is not perfect. So that's why we're going to try to get a jump start on the conversations tomorrow. One of the first questions, and probably the most pressing we've heard repeated, is are officers going to go out and stop people from not wearing masks if that's what the order requires? And we got that same question with a different set of facts when the initial COVID restrictions came into place in Franklin County, both from our local county health officer, and then when Governor Kelly issued the state mandates. And our approach has been and will be education first, assist second, and then if we have to do anything else beyond that, that is within our authority to do that, in consultation with our city attorney, our county attorney, and anyone else that needs that, likely at the Kansas Attorney General's office, because I know that the Attorney General's office is working behind the scenes very quickly to develop protocols, procedures for law enforcement. There are very specific steps that must take place with these public health orders in order for them to be sustainable in court. So I know that's going to come as well. American Eagle was gracious in this community throughout this entire COVID process, and they donated 10,000 masks to the police departments in the city to use. So what we've done is bolstered our supply in our patrol cars. So the first thing we're going to do is if we have contact with people and you don't have a mask, as long as we have supplies to give out, we're going to give it out. We believe that, trying to be safe, both in our internal and our external practices, is doing our small part to keep Ottawa safe and Franklin County safe. So we're going to continue to do that. So I'm going to ask the community to do a couple of things for me, especially leading into this weekend, knowing that our information out to you might be a little bit slower than I would prefer. The first thing is regarding masks. Please do not call 911. 911 is to be used for emergencies, and we want to make sure we have lines available to respond to emergencies this weekend, and we don't clog those up with non-emergency inquiries. There is an administrative line for the police department that's available during business hours, and there is a non-emergency dispatch number where you can call and get information. But dispatch really should not be your first stop to try to get information regarding the orders that are going to come out. So the next thing is our officer is going to be out patrolling and looking for people not wearing masks. I drive around this community a lot, every single day, and if people are in public spaces, our parks, our sidewalks, our public buildings, rarely during COVID do I see people who are closer than 6 feet together. Everyone in Ottawa and Franklin County is doing a great job keeping socially distanced, practicing safe behavior, and trying to do their part. So I would think that's going to continue regardless of what the mask order is or what it's going to say. Now that brings me up to the last point, which is private property. So I'm going to use a business in Lawrence that I'm familiar with. It's not in Ottawa, but it's a store. It's a commercial building supply store that requires its customers to wear a mask before entering. Private businesses on private property can require a customer to wear a mask. Private businesses are well within their authority to do that. So if a customer were to go in and refuse to wear a mask after the business asked them to do that, that business could ask somebody to leave. That person should leave. If they don't want to wear a mask and that's what the business requires, then our suggestion is go ahead and leave that business and go somewhere else. What I don't want to have happen is two parties who disagree on whether they should or should not wear masks, regardless of what the order is, result to any type of violence. I can tell you that physical disturbances or physical violence will not be tolerated by this police department that occur on private property, and we will take enforcement action necessary if that happens. So just do all of us a favor. Don't get into disturbances. You can silently disagree and leave the business and go away and come back another day that you feel more comfortable, or after maybe some of these other restrictions go. But those are kind of what I would anticipate are some of the likely inquiries we're gonna get over the weekend after this order is given. And I just want you to know, I want this citizens to know, and anyone else traveling through Ottawa to know that we're gonna monitor that situation. We're gonna be available to answer questions when we can. We'll have supplies to hand out if we need to keep you as safe as possible. And we're just gonna be part of the community and out there helping do our part to keep Ottawa safe. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have specific to this, although I probably don't have a lot of in-depth answers right now until the order is published. But I have spoken to the sheriff, I have spoken to the county attorney, and a couple of other of our local law enforcement leaders, and I think all of us are on a very similar page in our approach and how we're going to handle this after the governor's order is issued.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief Weingartner, this is Commissioner Crowley. Thank you for your explanation. You as always, you elegantly put your words out there and kind of explain to everybody what you expect. If anybody's watching, obviously they can tell that I'm the only one sitting in this room with no mask on. Not that I don't have one. I wore one in, and I plan on wearing one out. I thought long and hard about being in this room tonight and whether I would or would not wear a mask. And I don't want anybody to think that sitting here without a mask on that I disrespect the other folks that are in this room, because that's not at all what it is. I took my cues by sitting here from the county commission meeting, as you mentioned earlier. As I watched Bud Ransom walk up to the podium, when he got to the podium, he took his, Dr. Bud Ransom, he took his mask off and had his conversation, spoke with the county commissioners the whole time he had his mask off, and when he was done, he put his mask on and walked back out. And then Nick Robbins, the Franklin County Health Director, actually walked up with no mask and had no mask on the whole time. So I take my cues not from social media and the doctors that are on there, but the doctors and people that know a lot about what's good and what's not good for our community, and that's kind of where I directed myself when I got into. I felt a lot more comfortable when I walked in, and don't take this wrong, commissioners, that some of you weren't here, because there's more social distancing that actually can occur. I even got on the governor's website, and that's one of the things that she states is that if you cannot maintain social distancing of 6 feet, then masks should be required or expected. And I totally agree with that. So that's to hear that you kind of repeat some of those things that I like I said, I think you more elegantly put it than I do. But I just wanted to kind of explain to everybody my position about sitting here amongst my peers.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Crowley. Richard, your report is over, and thank you, Chief Weingartner. We're up to commissioner reports. Eric, did you have any further things that you want to say?
Just one thing on a much lighter note, safe and happy 4th of July Independence Weekend for everybody, please.
Good job. Commissioner Kaler? Any report, anything you want to say of report?
It seems like every single year when we come right around to 4th of July, we always have conversations about the importance of the holiday. And this particular year, we will be celebrating 244 years as a nation, in which that we were no longer subject to the rule of Britain. And have we learned everything? No. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. But I think we get better and better. And I think that we are learning new stuff literally day by day as a nation. And we are stronger together. And if we tear each other up, it does us absolutely no good. So happy birthday to the United States, and that is my comment.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Commissioner Skidmore.
I just want to remind everybody, July 3rd, this Friday, in association with the Ottawa Ministerial Association, they're going to have an evening of prayer. Several of the pastors have gotten together and recognized that, we need to come together as a community to be praying for our city, our county, our state, and our country. We seem to be going through issues now that are much more paramount than they were even a year ago. And so we need to get together in prayer. So that's going to be from 7 to 8:30 at City Park near the gazebo. So you're sure welcome to come. Anybody can come. We're asking everybody to wear masks and social distance there as well. So that's important. And I appreciate Commissioner Crowd talking about the masks. We all need to wear them when we go out, so don't forget.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jorgensen.
Mr. Mayor, I have nothing to add to what's already been said tonight.
Thank you, Commissioners. I might just say I appreciate the comments that Commissioner Crowley said. I am a believer in wearing a mask. I had a friend of mine's daughter went to a beauty shop earlier, and all the people in the shop were wearing masks, and all the customers were wearing masks. There was social distancing, but it turned out later that one of the dressers in the beauty shop turned out to have COVID-19 positive test, and so then they went and checked 186 some people who had gone through that week, I guess. But since they've demanded that customers wore masks and they wore masks, not one of them came down positive, which is a good indicator that masks do have an effect, and you see it on the tests that you see sometimes on TV. If you got a mask on and you cough, your stuff goes out maybe 2 feet. Without a mask, it goes out 6 to 8 feet. With a double mask on, it's basically contained, and that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about ourselves. We're talking about those people that we approach and want to protect that. So many of us don't like to wear seat belts. Some of us still don't wear seat belts, and we don't need a seat belt until we have a wreck, until we get into some trouble and cause other people trouble. So again, we encourage the use of masks. At this time, I guess the county did not anything but encourage that, and that's what I am encouraging tonight. And as you do go around, as the chief said, social distancing seems to be on everybody's minds, but the mask seems to be a burden and a problem to a lot of people. So let's see how that works. Sometime we might have to come back and say, we're going to try it for 2 or 3 weeks, and we got to get this curve flattened. Kansas is one of the states that's the fastest increasing in positive towards the COVID-19, and if we're going to get through it, we've got to get it down to where everybody wears what they personally have to do to get the virus under control so we can be safe. I want to wish everyone a happy 4th and a safe 4th. And the announcements that we're having is that the City Hall is going to be closed this Friday because of the holiday will be observed. Monday the 6th, we have a study session here at City Hall or by Zoom. The 13th, we'll have a study session 4 p.m. at City Hall or by Zoom. And then the 15th is our next regular meeting, and that's going to be at 10 a.m. in the morning at City Hall by Zoom. If we have no other things to come before us, I would adjourn this meeting at 8:54.